Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to pick up your copy of my first detective story. It's a novelette entitled An Ounce of Prevention. And it's still got a touch of science fiction in it, but I think you'll enjoy it. It's available for the Kindle for only 99 cents in the United States and most other territories. And the title, again, is An Ounce of Prevention. Well, folks, we're going to get into today's episode of Mr. Chameleon. I'll warn you in advance, though, the sound quality is really poor. It's perhaps the poorest sound quality we've played on the show. And so I was kind of borderline about playing it, but hope we can get the general nature of the plot and story. The episode aired on April the 24th of 1953, and the title is Murder and the $1 Million Smile. So let's take a listen.
Mr. Chameleon in The Case of Murder and the $1 Million Smile. Tonight we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters in another of his celebrated cases of crime and murder. Mr. Chameleon, as you know, is the detective who frequently uses a disguise to track down a killer, a disguise which at all times is recognized by the audience. Tonight, a case of murder and the $1 Million Smile. The opening scene of tonight's murder case is the drawing room of a richly appointed mansion overlooking Gramercy Park. The master of the house, the elderly philanthropist, Julian Ford, has sent them to share his home. And now as they enter the drawing room, the old man smiles at them, little and horrible consequences.
Come in, children. Come in.
You wanted to see us, Uncle Julian?
Nothing is wrong, I hope, sir. In fact, I have news for you and Ethel, which I'm sure will please you very much. Ethel, you and your husband have shared my home for some time now.
Oh, you've been very generous to us, Uncle Julian.
Nonsense. It's good for a loan. And now, in a few hours, we shall have an additional member to our little household.
An additional member?
Yes, Alan. I'm bringing a guest here. A young woman named Jennifer Gray. And
what are you saying, Uncle Julian?
Who is this Jennifer Gray?
Well, she's a girl I met some weeks ago when I was taking my walk in Gramercy Park. I've seen her every day since then. She's a waitress at a little restaurant down...
You're here? To this house? To live?
Yes, Ethel did. She has no family or friends. And not much education, I'm afraid. But her smile. Why, the moment I saw that warm, ingratiating smile of hers, I felt drawn to her. I felt toward her as if she was the daughter...
And we understand how you must feel and... how kind you always are. But this girl, you know nothing about her.
She's probably a conniving little fortune hunter, taking advantage of an old...
I assure you, Alan, she's a sweet, innocent child, whom I shall bring here and perhaps someday even adopt as my daughter.
Uncle Julian, we realize how generous you are.
Too generous, perhaps, for your own good, Uncle. This young woman could be dangerous. She's a total stranger, and to bring her into this...
I'm the master of it. Now, I'm picking up Jennifer Gray at her rooming house at 7 this evening and bringing her home with me. And I...
As you wish, of course, Uncle Julian.
Naturally, sir.
I'm going to the study. I'll see you both later.
This is outrageous.
I always knew your uncle was eccentric, Ethel, but now he's gone stark raving mad.
Alan, if he adopts this dreadful girl, he'll leave his money to her. Every penny of it, probably. She'll be getting money that belongs to us. Money I've waited for all these years. And I won't be cheated out of it. I won't, I tell you, I won't.
Your Uncle Julian is a fool.
What are we going to do, Alan? He's bringing her here at 7 o'clock.
Don't worry, my dear. She won't be coming here at 7 o'clock. Word, Ethel, Jennifer Gray will never set foot inside this house.
Now, promptly at 7 o'clock that evening, Jennifer Gray has a rented room. And he is greeted by the landlady, Mrs. Hester Krebs, who says to him,
Jennifer, come on, I'll go along with you. I want to say goodbye to her.
Thank you, Mrs. Krebs.
Oh, you know, Mr. Ford, ain't many girls alone in New York who are as lucky as she is.
I'm the one who's lucky, Mrs. Krebs, to have met a girl like Jennifer Gray. What a sweet, lovely child. She has the nicest smile I've ever seen. So...
Well, looks like it's turned out to be. Well, she deserves a break. She's real excited about going to live in that big, elegant house of yours. Here we are. This is her room.
Jennifer, my dear, it's Mr. Ford. I've come for you.
That's queer.
Jennifer, are you in there?
Jennifer, why didn't you... Oh, Mr. Ford, look. There on the bed. Oh, it's Jennifer Gray.
Dear heaven. There's a knife in her throat. Mrs. Krebs, call the police. Hurry. The poor girl's been murdered.
Now, half an hour later, we find Mr. Chameleon, the famed and dreaded detective, and his assistant, Detective Dave Arnold, in the murdered girl's room. Mr. Chameleon says,
Dave, Jennifer Gray was stabbed to death sometime shortly before 7 o'clock tonight.
Looks as though...
Overturned bureau drawers, papers scattered over the floor. Whoever was here must have been looking for something.
This is horrible, Mr. Chameleon. Horrible.
You're Julian Ford, aren't you? The millionaire with a reputation for helping people.
Well, I made my money through pure good luck, Mr. Chameleon, when they found copper on some property I owned. I always felt I wanted to...
Like Jennifer Gray, for instance?
Yes. I have a house on Gramercy Park where my niece, Ethel, and her husband live with me. And I'd invited Jennifer to stay with me, too.
How well did you know the murdered girl, Mr. Ford?
Well, I was attracted by her simplicity and charm, and we became great friends. And now she's been murdered, and it's my fault.
Your fault, Mr. Ford?
Because if I'd arrived half an hour earlier, she might never have been murdered.
Mr. Chameleon, I found this on the floor. Oh, let's have it, Dave. Obviously expensive. Mrs. Krebs, you're the landlady here?
That's right, Mr. Chameleon, and I run the pawn shop next door. The only one I knew of, Nicky Collins. And they had a terrible fight last night.
A quarrel? What about?
How should I know, Mr. Chameleon? But I heard them arguing up here in her room. He found a pocket, number 712.
Dave, have Mickey Collins picked up and brought to police headquarters with Jennifer Gray, and if it led to her murder...
Jennifer's dead. I loved her.
Come now, Mickey Collins, pull yourself together.
You had a fight with Jennifer Gray the night before her death. Maybe you wound up that fight by killing her.
That's a lie. Yes, I went to see Jennifer last night, sure, but I didn't quarrel with her. I wanted her to go back to Cedar Springs with me, Mr. Chameleon. Jennifer and I grew up there together.
And when she wouldn't go back, you threatened...
Tell you, last month, she left town and came here to New York without any explanation. I followed her and traced her here to the rooming house last night. She was living in terror of her life.
In terror of her life, Collins? What did she mean?
She told me she'd found out something and wanted to go to the police. But she was afraid to. Then pleaded, but she wouldn't explain.
It sounds like a phony yarn to me, Collins. It's much more likely you got angry and jealous because she was going to live in that millionaire's house. So jealous it drove you to murder.
That's not true, Detective Arnold. Sure, I wanted to marry Jennifer. But I was...
Possibly, Collins. Or, as Detective Arnold suggests, you may have wanted to stop her from walking out of your life and invented the story of her being terrified. But that remains to be seen. You may go for the present.
Pretty emotional guy, that Nicky Collins.
Yes, but he could be telling the truth, Dave. A young... But afraid of whom? And why? Dave, let's drive over to Julian Ford's house. I'd like to have another talk with him.
And meanwhile, in the drawing room of the home of the millionaire philanthropist Julian Ford, his niece Ethel is...
Ellen! Ellen, where in heaven's name have you been?
Keep your voice down, will you, Ethel? Where's your uncle?
Uncle Julian's in the study. Oh, Ellen, that him?
Yes, what about her?
She was found murdered, stabbed to death at her rooming house. Uncle Julian came home a few minutes ago and told me that Detective Mr. Chameleon is on the case.
Chameleon? He's supposed to...
Won't have to worry about Jennifer Gray threatening our security any longer. We can... Alan, what's the matter?
Ethel, Litzman comes here. I want you to tell him I didn't leave this house all day.
But that isn't true. Alan, where have you been since 5 o'clock?
Never mind that. But you're to tell this Detective Chameleon I was in this house all day. Can you get that through your head, Ethel? My very life may depend on what you say to him.
Mr. Chameleon in The Case of Murder and the $1 Million Smile will return in just a moment. A refreshing note about the music baritone Donald Richards as host. There's Music in the Air tonight offers a wonderful lineup of Viennese favorites with Alfredo Antonini's orchestra playing strictly from Danube melodies. Another's new musical, Can Can. Tenor Clark Dennis, soprano Francis Greer, vocal Eddie Johnson and the Serenaders join in the festa presented by CBS Radio later tonight. And now, back to Mr. Chameleon in The Case of Murder and the $1 Million Smile. Death in her rented room just before moving to the home of the rich philanthropist Julian, who was in love with her, that Jennifer feared for her life. Now, at Julian's at her husband, who was saying to her tensely,
Ethel, when Mr. Chameleon gets here, you're to tell him I didn't leave this house all day.
But, Alan, that's not true. You went out of the house at 5 o'clock, right after Uncle Julian told us about his bringing Jennifer Gray to live with us. Where did you go? Where have you been?
Never mind that. You're to say that I depend on it.
That is a very interesting statement, Mr. Alan Drake.
What?
Who are you? And that man with you?
I'm Detective Arnold, and this is Mr. Chameleon of the police.
Oh, Mr. Chameleon.
And you, I take it, are Julian Ford's niece, Ethel, and this is your husband.
How did you get in here?
Yes, we didn't hear you.
Obviously not, Mr. Drake. However, Detective Arnold and I heard you very clearly, asking hardly. And a man doesn't need an alibi unless he's hiding something, like murder, for instance.
No, Alan didn't kill Jennifer Gray.
Be quiet, Ethel. Mr. Chameleon, what you're suggesting is ridiculous. A total stranger.
Perhaps for a very logical motive, Alan Drake. Self-protection.
Self-protection.
Perhaps even planning to legally adopt her as his daughter.
Why?
As matters now stand, your wife inherits Julian Ford's entire fortune. However, if Jennifer Gray had come here, had been adopted by him, you...
No right to say that. We didn't resent that girl coming here. When Uncle Julian told us, we were delighted about it.
Of course we were.
Mr. Drake, Detective Arnold and I overheard you warning your wife to tell us that you hadn't left her. Where were you between 5 o'clock and 7 this evening?
I was still out because I didn't want to become a suspect in that girl's murder.
You've already made yourself a very strong suspect, Mr. Drake. You had plenty of time to go to Jennifer Gray's room and stab her.
No, he didn't. Alan wouldn't.
And as for you, Mrs. Drake, you also had a motive. The threat of losing your inheritance, and with it possibly your husband's love as well.
Oh, stop it. I didn't go near Jennifer Gray's rooming house.
And neither did I.
It's no use, my boy. Tell them the truth.
Uncle Julian.
Come in, please, Mr. Ford.
Alan, if you'll be honest with Mr. Chameleon, we can help you.
What are you trying to do? Involve me in murder?
Oh, you're already involved, Alan. Mr. Chameleon already knows you were in Jennifer Gray's room.
This is your lighter, isn't it, Mr. Drake? It has the initials A.D. engraved on it.
All right. Yes, it's mine. Believe me.
Alan!
I went to see her to persuade her to change her mind about coming to live here. When I opened the door to her room, she was lying across the bed with a knife in her throat. It was horrible.
Oh.
And I didn't call the police because I didn't want her murder pinned on me.
Alan! Oh, Alan, you said that she would never set foot in this house, but I never dreamt you meant to...
Ethel! You little fool. I told you I didn't kill her. What are you trying to do? Send me to the electric chair?
All I wanted was to help that girl. If I...
Mr. Chameleon, look. I found something. Here, take it.
What is it, Mr. Chameleon?
A bracelet, Dave. A diamond bracelet.
What? What would a girl like Jennifer Gray be doing with a diamond bracelet? Uncle Julian, had you been...
Certainly not.
I doubt if your uncle gave her this one at any rate. This bracelet looks like some jewelry that was reported stolen some weeks ago.
Stolen? Oh, no. No, I don't believe it.
The fact this bracelet was discovered in her room doesn't mean that she stole it, Mr. Ford. As for you, Alan, I have not arrested you yet. But don't leave the house until you hear from me.
I swear I'm innocent, Mr. Chameleon. I swear it.
Bracelet. I don't get it.
I think I'm beginning to get it now, Dave. When we get to headquarters, I want you to check on something. Case. The one she was in the middle of packing when she was murdered. I have a feeling an important clue may be in that suitcase.
And later at Central Police Headquarters, Mr. Chameleon is in the office of the police commissioner. The murdered girl's valise is...
Suitcase was brought in exactly as it was, Chameleon. She must have been packing it to move to Julian Ford's house when she was murdered.
Yes, so I gather, Commissioner. Not, Commissioner, I've already found it. But not among her clothes.
Excuse me. Police Commissioner speaking. Chameleon, Lieutenant Dale calling.
Oh, thanks. Lieutenant Dale, you're calling? You found it, eh? Yes. Yes, come on. Dale, thank you very much. Did you check on what I asked you to?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon, and you were right. The landlady, Mrs. Krebs, who runs pawn shop next door to Jennifer Gray's rooming house, has a police record, sure enough.
I thought I recognized her.
5 years ago, she was arrested for using her pawn shop as a fence. She was charged with being a receiver of stolen goods.
She stole the girl's room. Looks like the stolen bracelet.
Great Scott. Young Mickey Collins, who was in love with Jennifer Gray, said she had discovered something and was terrified.
Mr. Chameleon, Jennifer would go to the police. And maybe she had the stolen bracelet in the murder room to make it look like Jennifer Gray was a thief.
Dave, I'm sure to get the proof.
What kind of a disguise, Chameleon?
I'm going to become temporarily Caleb Watson. I just arrived in town. And this will be the voice of my disguise.
Hi, Dingo. Sure feels mighty good to be down here in New York. Well, they're always talking about them smart city slickers. You two up our sleeves. Yes, sirree.
Hey, that's great, Chameleon.
You want me to get all the suspects down here, Mr. Chameleon?
No, that won't be necessary. Dave, I want you to make... I'm going to pay a visit to that pawn shop of Mrs. Hester Krebs, disguised as Caleb Watson. And...
And sometime later, we see Mr. Chameleon, disguised as Caleb Watson, entering the dingy little pawn shop. The voice of his disguise says,
You, Mrs. Krebs, lady who owns this pawn shop? No, ma'am. My name is Caleb Watson. I'm Jennifer Gray's uncle. I heard about her being murdered.
Jennifer Gray was your niece?
Yeah, she and me. Mrs. Krebs, I come to claim something that belonged to Jennifer and, the key to her safe deposit box.
A key? I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, now, maybe you're changing the little racket you're running here. Jennifer called me yesterday saying she, found...
What? You must be crazy.
Well, now, I could go to the key you stole from Jennifer's room, and I won't.
I haven't got any key.
I'll be back. Oh, sorry, mister. Didn't see you standing in the doorway.
Why don't you watch where you're going?
Well, said I was sorry, didn't I? Dingo?
What about that key, Mrs. Krebs?
Mr. Ford, I don't know what that old fool was talking about.
Don't lie to me.
Mr. Ford, you're joking me.
Answer me.
What have you done with that key?
Oh, I can't breathe.
Now, take your hands off her throat, Julian Ford.
Mr. Chameleon, it's you. You came here in disguise.
Mr. Chameleon, oh, Mr. Chameleon, you saved my life.
Were you trying to commit a second murder, Ford? Killing Jennifer Gray wasn't enough, I think.
What? What the devil are you talking about?
I suspected you of Jennifer Gray into the trap I set for you when Detective Arnold telephoned you and asked you to come here.
Why, you're insane, Chameleon. Jennifer Gray was my friend.
She was also the daughter of Tom Gray, a man you defrauded 20 years ago when you jumped his claim to the Queen Anne copper mine. After a mysterious accident.
From
an old newspaper in the bottom of the murdered girl's suitcase. Also from some papers in a safe deposit. The newspaper told of Tom Gray's death at the mine. And the paper in the safe proved that he, and not you, was the legal owner of that fabulous copper mine.
Kind old man Julian Ford killed Jennifer Gray? When did you suspect him?
My doubts were aroused at his home when he told his nephew Alan that I had discovered a cigarette lighter in the dead girl's room. So that you couldn't have known that it was your nephew's unless you yourself had planted it there. The way Alan planted the diamond bracelet there afterwards to take suspicion.
All right, Chameleon. It's true I killed Jennifer Gray. I had to protect myself. A few days ago, Jennifer came to me with certain papers, but she, not I, was the rightful owner of the copper mine. I'd have lost everything to her.
And she might eventually have even proved that you killed her father.
No, I didn't kill Tom Gray. That was an accident. But I took over his claim to the copper mine in my own name and made a fortune on it. Restitution, but I needed time to think. So I invited her to stay in my home.
And she accepted, never dreaming that your motive was murder.
I was to her room and stabbed her. At 7, I returned with Mrs. Krebs, pretending to discover her body. I thought no one would ever suspect that I, with my reputation for philanthropy, could be...
Brutal murders I've ever encountered. Come on in, Dave. Put the handcuffs on this man. This is one time when I shall take great pleasure in watching the wheels of justice take their course.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played based on the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert, directed by Henry Howard, with music selected by Victor Arden. Listen next Friday evening at the same time for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in the Tomorrow's daytime listening on CBS Radio features John Reed King's lively Give and Take quiz show and merry competition of Arlene Francis, Bill Cullen, and their opposing teams on Fun for All. Every BS Radio, with Give and Take and Fun for All over most of these same stations. Don't miss a minute of these two delightful daytime Listen for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in The Custody of the Child murder case at the same time next week. Gangbusters go into action Saturday nights on the CBS Radio Network.
Well, this episode from 5 years into this series run. And it's somewhat remarkable that the program made it that long when seemingly better shows got canceled. And of course, we get the exact or a very similar plot. Here, it's the opportunity to live in the house and to enjoy the benefits, and not actually a marriage proposal as in the previous case. But this one plays on the same thing of, surprise, the rich old guy did it. Though this one wasn't as funny, and it may have just have been due to the annoying skips in the audio on this one. But I hope you enjoyed Mr. Chameleon. We will be back next week with the Case Book of Gregory Hood, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. If you have a comment, send it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter, Radio Detectives, and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. But from Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.